Thank you for tuning in to K&S Society TALK Live. K&S Society TALK Live is sponsored by Honesdale Cinema in Honesdale, PA. New screens, comfortable seating, cheap prices, and all the new movies for your entertainment viewing needs. Visit Honesdale Cinema in Route 6 Plaza in Honesdale, PA when in the area. Also brought to you by Ultra Toxic Television. It's not art, it's exploitation. Visit Ultra Toxic Television and add it to local streaming devices with myvidportal.com. Once again, it's myvidportal.com.
It's vile. It's disturbing. It's offensive. It's ultra-toxic television, now banned in over 10 countries. Ultra-toxic television, only on Roku. Get it at myvidportal.com. That's myvidportal.com. Ultra-toxic television. It's not art, it's exploitation.
Wrestling, of course, is the oldest natural sport in the world. A professional wrestler. Controversial? Yes. Merciless? Yes. Ruthless? Yes. But most importantly, a superb athlete? Yes. I was talking to Buddy Colt here in Florida, and I understand that you're still very unhappy over the fact that promoter Paul Jones is trying to sign Dory Funk Jr. to wrestle against Jack Briscoe.
Let me tell you this, and I think everybody's aware of it. I have defeated Dory Funk Jr. before. I have defeated Jack Briscoe. I have defeated practically every top wrestler in the world. None of these men can defeat Buddy Colt, and I think you and all these wrestling fans and Paul Jones are well aware of this. I should be the man in the ring with Jack Briscoe for the world title match. And let me tell you this, in a film coming up, you will see the devastating power of Buddy Colt.
Buddy Colt, one of the top 10 professionals in the nation today, continues to wreak havoc on opponents all over the world. Colt, a former Marine and champion wrestler in the amateur ranks, born and raised in New York City. He has a style when he wrestles that allows a man no quarter whatsoever. Colt is a fearless competitor, superbly conditioned, and attacks his foes from all sides. Colt has a master of holds, but he combines the rugged ability using his fists when necessary or his feet when necessary. He shows an opponent no mercy whatsoever. Wrestling, one of the top 10 spectator sports in the nation today, is beset with many men, but not many like Buddy Colt. Colt has broken numerous bones in his career as a professional wrestler, been injured many times, and as he has said, this is part of it. When you're a professional, you expect to get hurt, and you do get hurt. Buddy Colt is showing evidence here that he is capable of hurting his opponents. This one, his face now a crimson mask, is being set up for the infamous neckbreaker that Colt uses with such devastating effectiveness. Colt moves in, and now, showing that lack of mercy quality that he possesses. One of Colt's theories is, when you beat him, hurt him. Keep them psyched out.
None of these men can defeat Buddy Colt, and I think you and all these wrestling fans and Paul Jones are well aware of this.
Colt stays in superb condition by working out daily and by wrestling as often as he can. Buddy Colt, a professional wrestler. Controversial? Yes. Merciless? Yes. Ruthless?
I'm joined. Sorry about that little technical difficulty. I'm joined by my co-host, Peter Alden. How you doing, Peter?
What's up? How you doing, Keith?
Good, good. And we're going to be joined right now by the legend himself, the iconic, legendary wrestler, Buddy Colt.
Good evening.
How you doing, Mr. Colt?
Here.
Thanks for coming on.
You know how excited I am about this show tonight, Mr. Colt. We've been talking about it. But,
yes.
I mean, you wrestled, decades, won numerous titles, went up against all the greats in professional wrestling. You conquered almost all the best there was. The list can go on and on and on. You many territories. You done it all.
Any country outside of the United States, and I defeated everyone in England and Japan and Australia, Hawaii, Canada, Puerto Rico, the Bahamas. It was a fantastic sport, and I loved every minute of it.
And I've been catching up on a lot of your matches. I mean, you facing Jack Briscoe, Eddie Graham, Dusty Rhodes. We teamed with Dusty Rhodes. I mean, it's just you had an amazing career, and I mean, both in the ring, also as a manager, also as a color commentator with the late great Gordon Soley. I mean, you had a magnificent career. In pro wrestling, like what? I understand you were in Marine Jiu-Jitsu and bodybuilding. You did a lot of competitions in the past before you got into professional wrestling. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. When I was I was in the United States Marines for 4 years, and I spent 2 years of that in Japan. While I was in Japan, I was taking judo lessons from Japanese instructors. Came to the base. That's where I started weightlifting and bodybuilding. And after I was discharged from the Marines after 4 years, I was living right outside of Washington, D.C. And I joined the YMCA in Washington, D.C., and there I continued on with the bodybuilding and weightlifting and some amateur wrestling.
And then the territories wise, you like I said, you wrestled many countries. You also wrestled in the if I'm not mistaken, you wrestled for the old WWF a couple of times. Is that true with the father, Vincent Kennedy McMahon Sr.?
It was Vince McMahon Sr. I went to New York to wrestle, and their booking office was in downtown Washington, D.C. And Vince McMahon ran the territory then. That was before Vince McMahon Jr. But I lived in at that time in New York City at I forget the name of the hotel, but it was right off of Broadway. I stayed there working for Vince McMahon Sr. for not quite a year, and then I started kind of territory hopping and beating winning every match in every territory, and I became quite famous during that time. But then when I really hit the big time was after I changed my name to Buddy Colt, bleached my hair blonde. Same person, but I just changed my wrestling style.
Yeah, 'cause you went by Ron
When
Reed.
you say you changed your wrestling style, what would you say more of going from more of an amateur style to more of a pro wrestling style?
Pro wrestling, more aggressive.
I see. So more of a brawling style.
Right.
Yes. Okay. I see.
Whatever it takes to win a match.
Yep, but no one did it better than you did, Mr. Colt. You were when you came into the sport, you were known as Ron Reed. You won pretty amount of championships back in those days, and then when you changed name to Buddy Colt, you also went on continuing to win those championships from you won the Georgia Championship. You defeated many greats there with Nick Bockwinkel, Fred Blassie, Ray Gonko, Luke Graham. I mean, it goes on there. You won tag team championships. Then Florida, you won championships there. I mean, there's just so many. Now, what was the first territory you hit that was the one you really stuck with that you etched your name in? Was that the NWA with Georgia or Florida?
It was the National Wrestling Alliance, and the first big title I won was in Kansas City. The booking office was in Kansas City, Missouri, but in St. Joe, Missouri, Gus Karras was the promoter there, and I won the North American Heavyweight Wrestling Championship title from Iron Mike DiBiase, and that was the first big title I won. After that, it was almost every territory I went to, I wound up being the local champion and the nationwide champion.
And some of the greats you fought, like I mentioned, with like Nick Bockwinkel and Fred Blassie and such, and you also wrestled Lou Thez.
I held Lou a 1 hour draw in St. Joe, Missouri, and the crowd, we drew the biggest crowd they had in St. Joe in over 25 years. It was a packed house. I was still wrestling as Ron Reed at the time.
And
you actually came up in an era when you had to pretty much be a tough guy to break into the business. Who would you say was the toughest as a shoot that you had to work with, or who you worked with?
Luthez was one of the best all-around wrestlers in the world, and even to this day, the guy was just fantastic. And but everybody was surprised when I held him to a 1-hour draw in St. Joe, Missouri, and that gave me a lot of publicity all around the territory.
And a lot of you were one of the first, whether it was Buddy Rogers and there was of course Gorgeous George with the blonde hair that really stuck. That was before even Flair. You came out with the blonde hair. Do you think a lot of the wrestlers like Flair and a lot of the wrestlers after that time period that they took a lot from you and your style and your look?
Even Hogan.
I had lunch with Tony Atlas a few years ago, and he told me, he said that Ric Flair should pay me a residual with every match because he copies me so much. And at the time, I can say that I perhaps copied a few holes and maneuvers from Buddy Rogers, because Buddy Rogers was such a great wrestler and great showman at the time. But Ric Flair, almost all of his moves he copied from me.
And like I said, I was watching the match when you were fighting Eddie Graham, and you won the championship. That was a terrific match, by the way. For those of you listening, tune in to look up that clip and watch that match. How was it fighting wrestlers, great wrestlers back in the day, like Eddie Graham, and like you said, Luthez is one of the best. But you also fought Harley Race. Am I mistaken on that? You fought him a time.
Harley Race was a great wrestler, great champion, and he had the world's title, the NWA title, about 15 different times. But it sounds like something terrific, but that means he also had to lose it 15 times.
Mm-hmm.
So no, once I got a title, it took a lot of wrestling to get it off of me, because I was just so damn tough. And
when you look at wrestling today, I mean, I agree with a lot of the fans. I mean, you talk to a lot of the fans. Wrestling is not the same as it was back in the day. And do you see anything?
30, 40, 50 years ago.
And do you see anything like? Did you watch wrestling nowadays? Like, with any of the current promotions?
I might be channel surfing, and if I see something on there that seems interesting, I might stop and watch it. But there's more interviewing time out of a 1-hour wrestling program now, about 45 minutes, all in interview time, and very little wrestling.
Yeah, it's like a chore to get through.
The guys now, they're great athletes. They're bigger, stronger than they were. They're very muscular and good wrestlers. But so much of the time is wasted with the interviews.
Do you think the art of being an athlete is pretty much lost in professional wrestling these days? I mean, like we were talking earlier, like Lou says, even Gerald Briscoe was an NCAA champion. Like, do you think that the athlete side of it and the tough side of it is pretty much gone now?
Well, being a great amateur wrestler has always been a big help. But I was never a big amateur wrestler, and neither was Buddy Rogers or the Harley Race. Jack Briscoe was a great amateur wrestler, but when it came into the wrestling professional, things change. You can get hurt a lot worse. But Jack Briscoe was a great amateur wrestler, and also.
And do you think, since you were a little bit of a judo player as well, do you think if, let's say, you were coming up today, you would have maybe parlayed into MMA?
No, I don't think so. That's completely different. The guys in the MMA are fantastic. I really admire those guys, the punishment they take. But I don't think so, because when I retired from wrestling, which was 1975 after the airplane crash, there was no MMA at the time. Nobody had ever heard of it. That was something brand new. So it's hard to say what I would have done, because of everything I would have, should have. But I don't think I would have. I was on top in the National Wrestling Alliance and the WWE. It changed from NWA to WWE while it was in New York, where Bruno Sammartino beat Buddy Rogers for their World Championship. But the MMA those guys are tough, and so like I said, it's hard to say what I would have done.
And some of the wrestlers you worked with and also against are no longer with us, and they were great superstars. Like you would tag teaming with Dusty Rhodes, as I mentioned earlier. How was it like working with the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes?
Well, the guy was a great worker and a great showman, and he was box office. You know, when he put Dusty Rhodes in the card, he would draw people and sell tickets. And Dusty was not an amateur, but he was a great professional wrestler, and wherever Dusty went, he wrestled on top and he drew money. And so I've been Dusty's tag team partner many different times before the airplane crash, and Dusty was good to have as a partner.
And you went on, like I say, fighting someone like Nick Bockwinkel, Fred Blassie, Ray Gunkel, Luke Graham. I mean, they were all top stars in the prime back in the day. I mean, a lot of them went on to be legends. But
one person that didn't get a lot of variety was Bob Geigel in Kansas City. Bob Geigel was quite a wrestler, and he was good an amateur wrestler. And I wrestled Bob Geigel many times in the Kansas City area, and he was always a very tough opponent. I think he's gone now too. Most of the guys that were wrestling in the early 60s and 70s when I was wrestling, most of them are deceased by now.
And you, if there was a period, I mean, back in when you were in the sport, whether it was color commentating, managing, you're a great manager, excellent on the mic with Gordon Soley as a color commentator, phenomenal wrestler. What was it hard transitioning after the plane crash in '75 to go into another position that you were so used to being in the ring, now you're outside the ring in some sort? Was that a tough?
It was very, very hard to take that. It would be like a brain surgeon going from being a brain surgeon one day to being a hospital orderly the next. Even though I was glad to be able to contribute to wrestling as a referee, color commentator, manager, but it still wasn't the same. It was no similarity from being in the ring where you have 10,000 people screaming, and for me they were always cheering against me. But the more and more people screamed, the more they would come back the following week. But it was a great sport, and it was fantastic. I loved every minute of it. I would love to have the chance to do it all over again.
And it was playing the heel. I mean, being in, I want to say playing. Playing is a term that, I mean, being myself being brought into the sport by like Jimmy Valiant and trained a little bit by Larry Zbysko. We were taught by never to say the words played or anything like that. It's always been kayfabe because those are really good old school wrestlers like yourself. But being in the role as being a heel, to me, when I was in it, I thought it was phenomenal. I mean, people were like, how can you do that? It's just to get that heat. And nobody drew heat back in the day than you did. I mean, you knew how to draw that heat from those fans. And it was just, you got them all in an uproar.
I've had many, even promoters, tell me that they thought I was one of the greatest heels ever. And I was able to get the heat when nobody else could. And when I was in Japan, and to get the Japanese wrestling fans screaming and hollering is quite a feat. Because most of the Japanese fans just sit there very solemn. And when I wrestled there, I was going to get the Japanese fans up out of their chair.
Did you enjoy wrestling the Japanese style?
Oh yeah, I love wrestling everywhere I've had, and whether it be in Japan or Australia, England, I loved it. The professional wrestling styles was always very similar, no matter what country I went to.
Very snug.
And how many you're inducted in numerous Hall of Fames? How many, to give an estimate, how many Hall of Fames were you inducted into?
Really just one at this time. Now I've been notified by the promoters of the Gulf Coast Wrestling Alliance. They have me. They had me down for the Hall of Fame, and that, which would be in Mobile, Alabama. I think about March 8th or 9th. That would be the 2 Hall of Fames. But now, I was not inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. I'll say primarily when I was wrestling in New York, I was preliminary. That was in 1963 with Vince McMahon Sr. And at that time, I was not a star. I was just starting out. And I wrestled Buddy Rogers several times there, and he was one of the greatest. Buddy Rogers sat me down a couple times and gave me some good lessons and how to become a star. And I think Buddy Rogers was a great professional wrestler and great showman.
And like how you travel? You go to a lot of the conventions still, don't you? Like make appearances and such for the wrestling circuit.
Well, here in Tampa, Florida, every 3 months we have a luncheon. Brian Blair kind of hosts it. He puts it together, and makes the phone calls, and gets it set up. And so, then I have been to the conventions in Mobile, Alabama. They have a wrestlers reunion there every year in March. And then we had the NWA convention in Las Vegas, and I was inducted into the Hall of Fame out there. It was about 10, 12 years ago. But I was inducted into the Hall of Fame in Las Vegas, which was mostly the NWA guys.
You pretty much wrestled the who's who. Did you ever get to wrestle Billy Robinson at all?
No. When the first time I ever saw Billy Robinson was after my airplane crash, and when I was out of wrestling. And Billy Robinson came through Florida here, and I was not very much impressed. He had a big name as being a tough guy, a shooter. But to me, I think he was a lousy SOB. I never wrestled against him because when he came here to Florida, I was already retired from after the plane crash.
I see.
And when you went to Georgia to Florida, I mean, was it a big changeover? Like, which one did you really like the way their promotion was built in that? Was there one you preferred over the other?
Not really, because they had the same booker. Like Louis Tollett was a booker in Florida and Georgia, and Leo Garibaldi was a booker in both places. And the booker is the one that puts the matches together. He sees something that he thinks will draw a crowd the following week. He does his best to get that match together. But the style of wrestling in Georgia and Florida was almost the same, because you're going to have the same wrestler. They would almost swap wrestlers back and forth. If somebody came here to Florida, and after 3 or 4 months the crowd was getting bored with him, we might send him up to Georgia, and they might send somebody down here to Florida.
And to go into the time when you were on commentating, I think you really knew how to even draw heat, not just heat, but get the crowd going behind you as being a color commentator, aside Gordon Soley. One moment strikes in mind was with the Kevin Sullivan, when Kevin Sullivan came in, and how you two clashed there. And I mean, you really knew how to bring that level up a little bit, wherever position you were in, whether managing a wrestler or being behind the microphone and as a color commentator.
Well, since then, after I retired, I've been had Kevin Sullivan tell me I was one of the greatest heels he had ever seen. And so I took that as a great compliment. Getting as the crowd goes home, where they haven't been standing up all out of their chairs screaming and hollering, they won't be back next week. So it's a fine art to be a top heel. And I always did work my best, and I didn't realize I was probably better than I knew at the time. But since then I've had many people, the promoter in Miami Beach, D'Angelo, he told me that was the best heel that he had ever seen. And Dory Funk and Terry Funk have given me the same compliment. Kevin Sullivan told me I was about the best he had ever seen. And I take that as a great compliment coming from these guys.
The chat board is lighting up. I mean, so many people were listening to the show, and I mean, they even agree you're one of the greatest heels with their upbringing through watching professional wrestling. And I think that's something they're lacking now in professional wrestling is the heel. I mean, you have the good guys, bad guys, but you just don't have those strong heels anymore. I don't know if you agree with me.
It's not even believable as well.
There is no heat in the matches. I go and watch the match from the entire match. There's no heat, and you can't tell who the heel or the baby face is. And that's what I think they're really lacking. But there's more young kids going in. It might have been too bloody for some people back in the old days. They wouldn't want the kids to see so much violence. And they don't have you never see blood anymore.
No.
I was
no, and I.
Magazine a while, not a while back, but before I retired, where I was on the cover of the magazine, all bloodied up. I'd been told that that was considered the best wrestling magazine cover of all time, and it was made with. I was just all really bloodied up, but it draws people, and these things they don't happen anymore. But,
no, and when they do happen nowadays, like take one instance, there was I think it was Brock Lesnar fighting Randy Orton, and Randy, you got
to get the doctor out.
Little color there, got a little color there. The fans are on an uproar. I think they need that in professional wrestling. I mean, when you're slammed against a turn like the post or the barricade or in a cage, you expect to see a little bit of color.
Well, nowadays they just don't do that anymore. You never see color. Back in my day, I'll tell you one guy that used to really color was King Curtis. Okay, he would really get bloodied up. And then Abdullah the Butcher, I mean, he'd almost slice his head off and he'd get bloodied up so bad. There's been a lot of great wrestlers. When
then there was the Funks.
Bloodied up, they know that you're in there for the keeps.
And you also went head to head with the Funks at several times. How was it like working with the Funk brothers?
They're both fantastic workers. I worked for them actually their father. The first time I used the name Buddy Colt was in Amarillo territory working for Dory Funk Sr. When I'd already bleached my hair blonde when I was in Oklahoma working for Leroy McGurk, with Danny Jack Donovan as my partner, and I was Handsome Ronnie, and my partner was Dandy Jack. And then I went to Amarillo, Texas. That's when I changed my name to Buddy Colt. Ronnie Reed just sounded too baby faces, and so I switched my wrestling style and my name, and it really paid off big.
Can you compare wrestling with Terry Funk compared to, let's say, with Dory? Where was it hard to adapt to the two styles? And how would you compare the two styles working wrestling with them?
Well, their style is completely different. Dory Funk was very smooth and more wrestling. And
people would say Dory was one of the best pure wrestlers, but a lot of people really say he's a little bit underrated as well because of it. Like, would you say he was one of the most smoothest to ever work with?
It's hard to say about Dory Funk Jr. He won the world championship from Gene Kaninsky while I was working in the Amarillo territory for Dory Funk Sr. And we got word that Dory Jr. had just won the world title from Gene Kaninsky. And I worked with him quite a bit in Amarillo. I had great matches with him. But he was more into using holds, and his brother, Terry Funk, was more into wild brawl. So I would adapt myself to whatever style I was in the ring with. And I would always make sure, whether it be a crowd of 500 people or 25,000, I would work just as hard to give the wrestling fans their money's worth, because the ringside tickets to the wrestling fans were the same. It would be $5 for 500 people, $5 for 25,000. But I worked just as hard in the small crowds as I did the big crowds, so I made sure the wrestling fans got their money's worth.
Then you also went up against the I think two of the toughest were the Briscoes. Working with them, was that a fun experience for you back in the day working the ring?
Well, the style of Jack and Jerry Briscoe, man, they were collegiate wrestlers, and Jack won a national wrestler of the year, some kind of title in college. But if you're a good worker, if you're a heel or babyface, you have to adapt yourself to the style of whoever your opponent is, or none. And I had great matches with Jack Briscoe, and the promoter here in Florida put us together quite often. Every time we worked, we'd draw a big crowd and have a great match. And a great match is what brings the people back the next week.
I agree. And that's another thing they don't have nowadays. See, when you were tuning in and you're watching the old Georgia Championship Wrestling and the old NWA, they always had the good cliffhangers, always had that good spot, mostly at the end towards the showing, that drew the fans back to want to see a continuation. And I remember Jimmy Valiant in the locker room once telling me that's what wrestling lacks, is it lacks the story that they used to have where it just went full circle and it had a good story to tell. Nowadays, they go in the ring, they fight a couple of weeks, they go on to the next person, they fight a couple of weeks. They don't conclude the story that much. Do you think that's something that's wrestling's lacking nowadays? That's very important to the sport. Is a good build up with two opponents, good versus evil, and just going with it.
You're right. There's no storyline to it because the promoter whoever the booker was would be watching the matches, and he saw me having some kind of a skirmish with Jack Briscoe, where it might draw the following week. The book would bring that match back the following week. But here's right now here in Tampa at the Armory, we would pack that place every week with 8,000 people, and we work 52 weeks a year at the same place, and then we work 52 weeks out of the year in Miami and also in Jacksonville and Orlando. So now the WWE they'll work Tampa wrestling once a year, so they have that one time a year, and might draw 20,000 people, but we would draw 5,000 people 52 weeks out of a year. So you look at the math on how many people we drew, and there is no way Vince McMahon could draw like that. He'll draw these big houses once a year because he has the whole United States. He really has the whole world. But we would draw a big crowd every single week. And if you don't draw, you're not going to be main event the following week.
Like people in the chat room are saying now is that wrestling now and today can never be like it was back in the day when Buddy Colt was in. I mean, these are your fans talking. I mean, a lot of people, myself included, appreciate all you did in the sport, and we'll never see great wrestlers like yourself in the sport like it is. I mean, we have our Hogans and Flairs and that, but we don't have those true iconic wrestlers that really stood strong and fought tooth and nail, and it was just amazing to watch. We don't have that feeling anymore.
No, it's almost impossible for it to happen again because of the way the television is. We would televise our wrestling TV matches on a Saturday morning. And then Saturday afternoon, we'd hop in the car and drive down maybe to Jacksonville or to Miami. And now they don't even have to film them then anymore with the modern technology. They just push a button, and the local wrestling at the Armory it goes to the satellite. The satellite spreads that wrestling around the world. So they have a possible audience of 2 or 3 billion people, where we had an audience of maybe 100,000. And because of modern technology, which is, I guess, is good for the wrestling fans and it's good for the promoters. It's really good for Vince. Vince is a marketing genius. Vince McMahon has really taken. Well, he took advantage of the television. See, when I worked in New York, a television camera was something that took 2 men to lift it. Now you carry it in the palm of your hand.
And like, do you think the internet age now do you think that hurts the business as it is? Like, you're always getting leaks in the locker room. You're knowing what's going to go on. You have so many people spreading the gossip and speaking to the dirt sheets and such. Do you think that is a strong point of what's hurting the business nowadays? In my opinion, I think they should do the storylines behind closed doors, not let other people know. Just tell the storylines, or this is what we're going to go for, and just go for it instead of exposing it to the public. I think that's hurting a lot of what's going on. I don't know what your opinion would be, Mr. Colt.
Well, the way Vince McMahon is the first one to really publicly expose wrestling, and I don't know if it hurt that much, because people always thought, well, it really can't be happening, but if you body slam somebody, throw somebody over the top rope of the head or outside the ring, there's no strings or wires holding up. You really go over that top rope and you really hit the bottom. But it's such a different world now, and the guys now, they're great athletes, and they're big, strong bodybuilders. But you miss the storyline. They just can't do it because of the TV. The television broadcast worldwide now. We show the wrestling that we just filmed at the Armory. A 1-hour wrestling show would be shown here in Tampa. Then after Tampa, they would take that wrestling tape, put it on a Greyhound bus, and they take it down to Miami. But now, with your little cell phone you hold in your hand, you can promote the world with your cell phone. So it's impossible for it to ever change like it.
And for those listening, believe me, what Mr. Coach just said about throwing over the top ropes and hitting those mats, I mean, you do feel it. Me, being a manager, I was just a manager, and I felt it. And I could just imagine what you felt. Yep. Now, how was it?
You have to really work your butt off when you're doing it. If you don't work hard and show the promoter and the wrestling fans that you're working hard, you won't be back the next week. And so you're really competing against every other wrestler when you're in the ring. Now the wrestling promoters, like Vince McMahon, he makes all the decisions, and you do what he says, and the guys are making money. And like the guys are great athletes. I can never take anything away from any of them. And Vince McMahon, he got into it at the right time when the TV was going worldwide.
Talk about wrestling in the Armory. Like, it's such a legendary venue. People have talked about it for years. How was it like wrestling there? Like, let's say compared to other places. People used to say it had a lot of magic, and it was just a legendary staple when it came to the territories and venues.
Well, it wasn't like a legendary staple. It was every Tuesday night at the Armory, and that was just the way it always was. Tuesday Armory. The Armory right now it was sold to the Glazers. They're the ones that own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers football team. But they turned it now. It's a Jewish community center. They remodeled the whole thing, and the wrestling is gone. And it can never be the same without the Armory. But neither would anybody ever try to make it the same. There's been several people have tried local wrestling and drawing a big crowd, but you can't do it without TV, and you can't get TV because you're bucking Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon he made himself, I guess, probably a billionaire, which is great. And he took over the promotion from his father at the right time.
And have you ever? I'm sure you have, but Madison Square Garden, they say now, is like the mecca of pro wrestling. Have you fought a lot in the Madison Square Garden arena?
Not a lot, but I wrestled Killer Kowalski in Madison Square Garden arena, and Tim Woods myself wrestled against the Fabulous Kangaroos in Madison Square Garden. And so I have been the old Madison Square Garden, and not when I was in New York, I was still fairly new in the business. I was not main event at the time, and so when I left,
people would say Armory was even tougher because you would have the crowd there. You'd have the same crowd there almost every week. So you were working with a crowd that was constantly there.
That's right. They were always there. They would reserve ringside seats. You make them pay for it in advance almost annually. And the momentum of the crowd, the noise in the place was deafening and ear-shattering. But if you didn't hear the people screaming, you're not having a good match. And if you don't have a good match, you're not going to be booked in the main event. It's only that I would work my tail off. If there was 500 people or 50,000.
And to shift a little bit, you worked with the late great Gordon Soley on color commentating. How was it like working with Gordon Soley?
I think Gordon Soley was probably the greatest wrestling commentator ever. And I sat beside him as color commentator for about 5 years. Now, when I first day I did the color commentary, I was more of a heel commentator, and the booker at the time told me, "Say, hey, but you're not a heel anymore. Now you're doing the color commentary on TV, so calm it down." So I kind of reluctantly stopped being a heel commentator, turned more to a babyface, more like a Gordon Soley clone. But it really wasn't my style to be a babyface commentator. I liked it better when I could just cut loose, and like the original Buddy Colt. And we just lost another one of the greats was Mean Gene Okerlund. Did you have any opportunity to work with Mean Gene or meet him or outside the ring or work with him in any of the, I never met Mean Gene. I saw him on TV a lot, but I never met him. Mean Gene came on the thing. I had the airplane crash in, I think, February 1975. And after that, when I stopped traveling around, there was no reason to, as a commentator or a referee. Mean Gene was a great commentator, but I never met him.
And out of all the wrestlers you went up against, tag team, who was the ones that stick in your mind that if you can have one more match with, if you're back in the prime days of professional wrestling, that you would love to step back in the ring with?
I'd say Buddy Rogers. He's a great worker, he has a great ring personality, and he knew how to get the crowd going, and he was a very good crowd appearance. Another one that was very hard to work with, the Sheik out of Detroit. The Sheik was pulling more gimmicks out of his tights. He'd pull out clothespins and screwdrivers and hammers out of his tights. And when he came into Florida and worked in Florida and in Georgia, I was the heel. He was a baby face. To out-heel the Sheik was a tough job. And he'd pull more gimmicks from it. Anyway, you had the referee search him, and he'd come up with something else. He'd pull it out from somewhere. He was a great draw. The Sheik, he drew a lot of money. I think Detroit was his mainstay.
The Sheik was a wild man in professional wrestling, one of the greats.
Yes, he was.
And now, some of the rest, I'm going to name a couple of
He's based in Detroit, if I'm not mistaken, the original Sheik, right?
Yeah.
The Sheik's home base was Detroit.
And trained a few guys as well under him.
He was.
And what was that, Peter?
I said the Sheik also trained a couple of guys that were under him, like Sabu as well.
Yeah, I don't know who he trained. I wasn't familiar with
You
that.
said Sabu's his nephew, I believe.
Yeah, his nephew, yeah.
Wrestlers like, say, Andre the Giant. Have you ever had any matches with him or encounters with him at all?
I've wrestled against him twice. The first time I wrestled against him was in Georgia, and I got disqualified. And then here in, both. The one time I wrestled Andre the Giant on TV in Atlanta, and we both got counted out of the ring. It was a double count out. But Andre,
they were working with Andre, or wrestling with Andre rather. Was either he loved you or hated you? How did he like wrestling with you, or how did you like wrestling with him?
I enjoyed wrestling with him. I had no problem with him. The match came off pretty much the way I wanted it to, and the heel will normally kind of lead the match, and Andre the Giant was very accommodating. He was great to work with. You wouldn't expect that, but he was. It was very easy to work with.
And some of the wrestlers that I'm gonna name, like, if you had would have you liked to wrestle them in when you were in the ring, like people like Hogan, if he came back in the era when you were in, or Flair or Piper, would any of them, like, how would you feel like having a match with them if you were back in that day when you were in the ring? Do you think they would stand up to what they are now?
I think they would, because they're business people. They both were big main event draws everywhere they went, and they would do what it takes to make money, and that's what it's all about. But I would have no problem working with either Ric Flair or Andre the Giant, Haystacks, Calhoun, and any other guys, because they were all in it business, and they were all in it.
That was another good match. Another good match was you and Haystack.
Haystacks, for as big as he was, he really got it real good. I enjoyed working with Haystack.
Yeah, that was a great match. I watched that a couple of times. Now, a lot of the fans are writing in that they would love to see you in the WWE Hall of Fame and to get the recognition that you deserve for all the years you had in wrestling. Numerous people are saying that in the chat room, and that's something that I would like to see also, because you gave so much to the sport. You were one of the greatest heels. Do you think there will be a time that we'll hopefully see you in the Hall of Fame in the WWE?
Well, if people like you or people that you know, if enough wrestling fans asked for it, or if Vince McMahon would take notice of it, I think it would be there should be a spot for it. But I can't nominate myself. I would take people such as you to nominate me and write into Vince McMahon.
And how do you feel nowadays when you have all these fans come up to you and tell you how much of an inspiration you were to them, and the young wrestlers and young talent in the wrestling ring would say how much they appreciate what you gave to the sport, and how they try to pattern themselves a little bit after you and look at you as an inspiration? How does that make you feel?
I'll give you one example. Even today, I went to the drugstore to pick up a prescription, and I had to sit in a chair and wait for it while they fixed it. And a guy sitting across about 10 feet away, he says, "You're Buddy Colt." I said, "Yeah." And he went, "Oh my God!" He said, "There's Buddy Colt live and in color." And he was all excited because he saw me at the drugstore. It makes me feel very warm inside. It's a great compliment when people do recognize me. And I always try and take time to shake their hand and talk to them a little bit. But it's a good feeling when people recognize me, because I haven't wrestled now in over 40 years, and people still remember me. And it's just a great feeling.
And I'm sure it's like
I think it's Gulf Coast Wrestling Organization. They have me up for a Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame title, and I think it's about March 8th or something like that, in Mobile, Alabama.
And when you switched into being a manager of pro wrestling, how was, like, I know how complicated that could be, but it's more like egging the fans on, getting the heat drawn, knowing the spots and so forth, being a good talk for your wrestlers. How was that adjustment to you? I mean, you were great on the mic. You were already a great heel. The transition to become a manager to heels, did that draw more heat to you?
Not really. Because I knew what a manager has to do, because I'd been in it long enough. I'd had managers, my manager that I'd managed other guys before. But it was just you do what you have to do in the ring, and being a man, I enjoyed being a manager because it kept me in the business. I enjoyed the wrestling business and being a part of it. Now, one thing that happened as a manager, I was managing King Courtesy OK, the big Hawaiian, and we were in Palatka, a little town here in Florida, and I'm sitting there at ringside. You see managers carry a little walking stick or cane. I'm sitting there with a cane watching the match. And all of a sudden some guy comes out of the stand and he swings at me, and I duck. And as I ducked, I swung the cane back, I hit him in the mouth. So the match was over, and I'm going out to my car. And all of a sudden, about 10 cops grab hold of me and they carry me down and then lock down. What the hell are you doing? They said, well, assault and battery, you hit that guy with your cane. I said, well, hell, he just trying to hit me in the head. But anyway, they were determined to put me in jail. So there was one fat, ugly cop there in Palatka. And he said, no, you're going to jail, boy. He said, I said, give me a bondman. He said, no bondsmen, they're all in bed. By now it's about 10 o'clock at night. He said, you're going to jail. It's a $500 cash bond. So I said, well, I don't have that much cash. He said, well, you just have to wait for tomorrow. So about that time, our agent, Mickey Barnes, was working for the wrestling office. He showed up, he had the nice receipts and a big bag, all cash. He said, how much was that? So Mickey pulls out $500 to pay him off. And they said, well, you better be back here for your court date. Well, anyway, I never showed up for the court date, so I guess they got a warrant for my arrest in Palatka, Florida. But I knew what would happen if I went back there, and they'd have thrown me in jail. But the fat cop, he was doing his best to try to get me, put me in jail that night. Because I had a wrestling fan, but I was really was self-defense. And Oklahoma one night when I was wrestling there, we worked a little angle where I was handcuffed to the ring post because my partner was wrestling Danny Hodge. And when the match was over, the cop comes over and does my handcuff. I get in the ring and I take the chain. I hit Danny Hodge in the head with it, and his head split open. He gets blood all over the place. By that time, everybody in the arena tried climbing in the ring after me. I had a chain in my hand. I'm hitting the wrestling fans upside the head. Now we had about 30 wrestling fans in the ring, and they were all after me. Then the other wrestlers came in and got them out. But when it was all over, Danny Hodge and my partner Jack Donovan, they're laying there in the middle of the ring. They had big gashes across the cheek of their rear end. Somebody slit them open with a knife, and they both took over 200 stitches to close up. But and it gets dangerous. And then another time here in Florida, I was in Orlando wrestling against Bearcat Wright, a big black guy, about 240 pounds, 250 pounds. And when the match was over, I forget what the finish was, but the people were going nuts when the match was over. I'm starting to get out of the ring, and here comes a police car, and the center, and stopped, and an ambulance right behind, and they got handcuffs on the guy ringside, and the ambulance, and I asked the guy ringside, what happened here? I said, well, see that guy over there? He said, well, he took a couple shots at you, and he missed, and he hit a wrestling fan in the neck on the other side of the ring. So they take him to the hospital, and they take the guy, did the shooting, and take him to jail. And they released him on his own recognizance. They said because Buddy Colt was cheating, and that I created a riot. Because I had so much heat that people were shooting at me, and that's kind of a feather in my cap. I got the people inside when I had so much heat, they tried to shoot me and slice me with a knife. But
you don't have that heat no more.
They don't get heat no more.
Nowhere near it.
No. In the South, the Southern wrestling, those fans get like up in a riot when they watch the sport.
Well, did you ever go to Puerto Rico?
Yes, I've been to Puerto Rico.
And I heard that's like a riot as well.
There's a complete wrestling in Puerto Rico, the Roberto Clemente ballpark.
Wow.
And they get crazy there in Puerto Rico. You have to be very careful. And the ring was set up right around where the pitcher's mound would be. The ringside seats all around it. You really had to keep your eyes open, and all the wrestlers would keep their eyes open for you when you're in the ring wrestling with the Puerto Rican guys, because they were wild and crazy there.
Now, Jimmy Valiant always brought up a lot of stories about you, and he always brought you up in examples of if you want to become a good heel, watch Buddy Colt. He always used you as an example. Did you work with Jimmy a lot, or did you work him at all in
Not at all.
you in the sport?
I know him, but I met him after the airplane crash when I was retired from wrestling. But I know Jimmy Valiant was great. He was good talent, and promoters liked him. The promoters liked him, and he was always used good.
He's an awesome person. I mean, but he always brought you up as an example. You want to become a great heel? Watch Buddy Colt. I mean, he always kept on me with that.
I feel that's quite a compliment coming from Jimmy because he was a top guy. He was very, very good. And they don't get much better.
No, he was a really. I mean, still to this day, he goes out, makes his appearances and such. Is there anything left in the sport of wrestling now that you would like to do one more time? Like, would you like to make an appearance at an event, or would you like to one more time not to wrestle but to become a guest commentator or become a guest manager or to make some appearance for the fans? Is there anything like that goes through your head sometimes?
I would like to make a guest appearance at probably Madison Square Garden. When I wrestled in Madison Square Garden the first time, I was I'd only been in the business about 6 months. I was brand new, and it would be nice to go back and make an appearance there. Well, actually, any of them, they're all major cities now. But I miss the wrestling. It was my lifeblood for many years, and I loved every second of it. I'd love to be able to do the whole thing all over again.
And is there anything
it's a testament that a lot of people in the late 70s and 80s paid homage to your style, even though your career was pretty much done in the ring. But there were many people who would pay homage to your style. How did that feel? Because you were getting a lot of the younger guys from the 80s giving you credit.
It gives me a big head. It makes me feel good that they give me that homage that they're starting out in the business and they like my style. See, when I was starting out, I liked Buddy Rogers' style. When I wrestled Lou Thesz, I liked his style. Lou Thesz and Buddy Rogers' style were completely different, but they were great in the ring, and I love working with these guys. They were the best. You learn when you work with the best.
Well, even Hogan, I think I read somewhere where Hogan was saying that when he went heel, when he went black and white in the WCW, when he went heel, you were one of his main inspirations. I don't know if you had read that, but
Hogan told me that.
Yeah, no, I found an article where they were mentioning it. Yeah.
Yeah, the first NWA match that Hogan had, he was wearing a mask, and I was the referee in that mask. But he told me later that I was a great inspiration to him.
Yeah, no, it's on the record as well.
I think that is a great compliment.
And
Hogan was raised right here in Tampa, and when I never dreamed that Hogan would become such a great worldwide superstar as he did, but he worked hard and he has the charisma and the personality and the interview and the skill.
Since you were from that area, did you know Matsuda as well?
Well, I knew him, but only I never met him until I came here to Florida.
You never? Okay.
He owned stock in the wrestling office, so he was here all the time, and he was quite an amateur wrestler and quite a worker. It was a pleasure to work with him.
Now, before we let you go, because I know, is there any, like a road story or anything, like a story that you want to tell that you tell all your fans that really sticks out in your head that was one of the best moments in your life in the ring?
It's hard to say one of the best moments in my life. Probably the first time I won a title when I won the Southern States Heavyweight Championship by defeating Iron Mike DiBiase in St. Joe, Missouri. I'd say that was one of the best moments because that was the first time I had a title. And that was the first time a wrestling promoter used me in the main event. And once you're in the main event, the first time, if you're drawing houses, the promoters all around the country, they know it. And so when you go to another territory, they know that they can make money with you. And And then that was really my first big break, was when I won the North American heavyweight title. Now, when I had the airplane crash, the plane crash, I was North American champion here in Florida. I had just won that title a week before that in Jacksonville, Florida, from Bill Watts.
And when you had the crash, and I think it was February 20th, 1975. You lost Bobby Shaw. He passed in that.
Yeah, but it was February 1975.
And it was wasn't it Bobby Shaw that was passed away in that crash with you when he was in the plane with you?
Bobby Shane passed away. It turns out Bobby Shane couldn't swim. See, where I crashed the plane, we were about 300 yards from shore, and the water was only about 10 feet deep there. But we had to swim ashore, and it turns out Bobby Shane could not swim. He was a professional athlete, and he drowned. And when they pulled the airplane, I guess it was about 2 o'clock in the morning when they had the plane crash. And we all swam ashore, and Iron Mike, what was his name? Austin Idol, and he did well as Austin Idol. Very hard. And we had to swim ashore. I got ashore, and there was a small boat setting in the water on davits with the cables, and so we pulled ourselves into the boat, and Gary Hart had gone up to the house there and call the cops, call the ambulance. We had a plane crash. I'm laying there on the shore and laying on the grass, and they had the rescue personnel, the hospital crew. They said, "My God, look at that! That's Buddy Colt." And that was the end of my wrestling career. I stayed in it from being a manager and referee and commentator, and I just love being in the wrestling business.
And in closing, is there anyone any advice that you want to give the athletes that are breaking into the sport now with the independents and hopefully going into the big leagues with the WWE, which is now it's going to be spread out. Now you have New Japan, Ring of Honor, and now you have the All Elite Wrestling coming about with Cody Rhodes and that. So we're going to have some competition again with the sport. But is there any advice you want to give these the talent out there that want to get involved with the sport?
Well, one thing, develop your body. When I first got into the sport in wrestling in Tennessee, I probably had the best physique in the whole territory. That was a big territory. But the year before that, I was second in Mr. Washington D.C. physique contest, and then I moved to Houston, Texas, and I was getting the weightlifting meets and the bodybuilding contest. When you go into a territory, I looked like a wrestler. And other guys, one day there in Tennessee, I'm going to the gym to work out. Some of the old timers sitting around the swimming pool drinking beer. They said, "Where are you going, kid?" I was going to work out. They said, "Yeah, $15 a night in Jonesboro, Arkansas." That might be true, but 6 months later, I was wrestling at Madison Square Garden, and they were still sitting there drinking beer. So you get out of it, what do you put into it? So one thing, you got to develop your body. The promoters want you to look good. The wrestling fans expect you to look good. They're going to buy a $25 ticket to watch you wrestle. They want to look at people that look like an athlete.
And I mean, there's so many questions I can talk to you. I mean, that's I'm sure I can talk to you for hours and that. There's so many questions, but the last question for myself is with the competition, how we lacked it when WWE bought the WCW and everything. I know we have Impact, but now when you see the promotions starting to come up again, like All Elite Wrestling, New Japan getting bigger and bigger, you have Ring of Honor. Do you think that the fans might be in store to see a good time of wrestling again with competition, not just tuning into one program? Do you think that's a good thing?
I don't think it will happen. The independents, they kind of teach the wrestlers to wrestle more in the old days, but they don't get the crowds. And with 200 people, you can't get the people really going that much. It's a tough business. You get out of it what you put into it, and like mentioned about the guy sitting around the pool drinking beer while I'm working out. 6 months later, I'm in New York wrestling big time, and they're still making the Jonesboro, Arkansas. But it was a fantastic life. I think I led a storybook life. And even today, when people recognize me when I'm out somewhere, it makes me feel good.
Like I said, there's so many. I could talk to you for hours. Me personally, being a huge fan of your work, huge fan of the time in the ring, following up on a lot of the work you've done, the stories I heard about you from other wrestlers. It's just amazing. But you're also a great inspiration to myself and to a lot of the people listening who are in the business or fans. Just all you've done for us in the sport, and we want to thank you for that.
I appreciate it. I think that's a great compliment. And I really love the business, and I'm setting them off now. I've got pictures of me all around the office, and some of them I've got a picture of me and Danny Hodge when I have a reverse headlock on Danny Hodge. And Danny Hodge was in Oklahoma. He was like a national hero. He won everything in college, and he took a silver medal in the Olympics in Russia.
And we hope to see you.
I have great memories.
All your fans, myself included, will hope to see you in the Hall of Fame of WWE. But even when till that happens, you're still going to be in the Hall of Fame to all of us because you are a legendary, iconic wrestler that paved the way for many. That
it would take people like you to petition Vince McMahon to put me in the Hall of Fame.
And
I think that I had such a charmed career. I mean, very few people have had the life that I've had, and I loved every minute of it. And
the chat board's lighting up with fans saying, "I love you, Buddy Colt. Thank you, Buddy Colt." And like I said, thank you for coming on the show tonight and talking about your career. And Peter, do you have any last questions for Buddy Colt?
Oh, thank you for having me.
Just basically the last question is there anyone that basically stands out that you see today that you're a fan of, and do you still watch the product at all?
Very rare. Sometimes I'll turn it on, and when they're doing these long-winded interviews, and where they're taking a 10, 15-minute interview, then having a 2-minute match, I just turn it over and change channel. But the only person I ever broke into wrestling was Brian Blair. And he organizes the luncheons all the time. And Brian is the president of the Cauliflower Alley Club, and he has been for about 3 years. And he's the only one I broke into the business, and he's done very well, and I admire Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Colt, for coming on to the show today. And the show's going to continue on with a tribute to you. I'm going to be playing some of your matches on the air tonight. And this show is all about you and a tribute to your great career and all you gave us. But thank you so much. And like I said, I'm always keeping in touch with you, and I appreciate all you've done.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And have a good night, Mr. Colt. And that was Buddy Colt that joined us today.
Yeah, it was a good episode.
Yeah, and like I said, he's taking the time, stepping back into the era of wrestling that he was in. I mean, you had so many great names. Like I said, he 6-time Georgia champion. He defeated like Nick Bockwinkel in the 1970. Freddie Blassie, who was a legend in the 70s. El Manga, Ray Gunkel, El Mongo. He fought numerous times. Luke Graham. I mean, he went on to fight the Andersons, Gene and Ole Anderson, and tag teamed up with Dusty Rhodes.
Even Kevin Sullivan, I was talking about.
Yep, Kevin Sullivan. I don't know if you ever seen that the clip where Kevin Sullivan came out when he was at Buddy Colt was at the commentating booth with Gordon Solie, and that was a great heel promo right there. Back then, the promos they gave, the talk they gave, were not scripted. They were just from the heart, and you got so many of the best promos from that era of wrestling, from the 70s, the 80s, those were some of the best promos you got from wrestlers.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And he's very underrated. I mean, I was just really, just letting him do his thing, talk about those times, because I was so interested with him and his stories. But he's one of the more underrated ones. He's one of those unsung heroes of wrestling in the sense that so many, I really wanted to kind of get into it, but I was just letting him do his thing. But so many people after him were inspired by him. And that kind of says a lot to the times because it was harder to watch wrestling back then. And you hear about so many stories of individual wrestlers, managers, just basically saying how much their style was inspired by his style.
And like you said, it's just 100% true. I mean, he paved the way for so many greats. And you watch a Buddy Colt match, you're not disappointed. I mean, he's just awesome. And with saying that, I'm going to go to a quick match of his with Buddy Colt versus Eddie Graham. And we'll be right back to join me and Peter as we go on with this talk on professional wrestling tonight.
Next, we're going to swing our cameras to the West Palm Beach City Auditorium, where Eddie Graham will be defending the Florida Heavyweight Wrestling Championship against the challenge of the former champion Buddy Colt. And you'll note in this match that Dandy Jack is very much in evidence in the closing moments of the match. And all of this will lead to the very special announcement we're going to be making just a little bit later on in the program regarding Mr. Dandy Jack himself. Eddie Graham has been a tremendous champion, and he has held regional titles all over the United States. At one time was co-holder of the United States Tag Team Championship. He's a man with great fighting heart and a great sense of justice and fair play. And, we're going to see what happens during this particular Florida Heavyweight Championship match, particularly what happens after the efforts of Dandy Jack have their effect and their toll on the match itself. So right now, let's go to West Palm Beach in the City Auditorium, the Florida Heavyweight Championship match between Eddie Graham and Buddy Colt. Into the match now, Eddie Graham, the Florida Heavyweight Champion, has a Buddy Colt in a side headlock. Graham comes off a good shoulder smash. This, of course, the beautiful West Palm Beach Auditorium. Eddie Graham now has the challenger in trouble. A good hip lock takedown. See Dandy Jack sitting at ringside. Now Colt moving against Graham. Graham using that elbow very effectively. Another good shoulder smash, but Graham is staggered too as his head collided with Buddy Colt's head. Colt scoring a takedown. Graham keeping his man tied up. Get those shoulders down. And Colt in desperation able to pull Eddie Graham off. And now Graham again moves into him, has him in a pinning combination, and again Colt is able to break it. Referee warning Buddy Colt about his tactics. Graham trying to move back on his feet now, blocked by Buddy Colt. Now he's back on his feet, and Buddy Colt catching some of the fury of Eddie Graham now, the Florida Heavyweight Champion, but Colt firing back with equal fury. Hip block takedown. Scissoring that arm now. Eddie Graham trying to break free. A jammed crowd here at the West Palm Beach Auditorium watching this Florida Heavyweight Championship match. Graham trying to block Buddy Colt. Caught this time. A good forward scissoring leg dive as Buddy Colt on the canvas. Eddie Graham still moving very effectively against the challenger. Trying to go for that figure four. Broken up. And Graham caught in the throat by Buddy Colt. And you see Dandy Jack nodding supremely confident at this point that they may have the champion out of action. Graham has a tremendous fighting heart. Graham whipped into that turnbuckle as Colt throw a knee into him. Graham ducked to one side and Buddy Colt hit the turnbuckle. Again, Eddie Graham goes for that figure four, and if he gets that figure four on, it'll be all over for Buddy Colt. He's got that figure four. He's got it. Colt now with Dandy Jack at his side makes it to the ring ropes. Eddie Graham forced to break the hold, but Graham realizing it was Dandy Jack, and now it's Graham after Dandy Jack. Eddie Graham outside the ring after Dandy Jack, and Jack trying to get away from him. Graham chasing him around now, catches him on the far side. Graham smashing away at Dandy Jack. Continues to smash away at Graham has completely forgotten the championship now. He's only out after one thing and one thing alone, and that's to get rid of Dandy Jack. Dandy Jack lacerated on the head. Graham still pounding away. The referee trying to get Graham back into the ring. And Graham hurdling the referee. Now, Dandy Jack into the ring. Eddie Graham still after him. Graham still after him. Still concentrating, and now a Sunday punch from Buddy Colt, catching him from behind, ripping across the eyes now. And now Eddie Graham back on his feet after Buddy Colt. And it is Eddie Graham who smashed into Dandy Jack, and he's stunned, partially unconscious, and Buddy Colt. Buddy Colt in a cross body ride, able to score the pinfall to win the Florida Heavyweight Championship after Eddie Graham was hurtled into Dandy Jack. They struck their heads, and Graham was partially unconscious. He's still in the ring, but nonetheless, the new Florida Heavyweight Wrestling Champion is Buddy Colt.
And we're back at K&S Society Talk Live. Our special guest we had this evening was Buddy Colt, wrestling legend. And did you notice something, Peter, listening to that clip? You notice how it was Gordon Soley who was commentating on that match, but you notice how he talked and how he went on with the match, calling the spots. You actually didn't have to watch it, but even listening it, you could picture being.
He had a very radio feel to him. He kind of came up from an age where, not everyone had a television, right? So he had one of those he didn't say too much, but he didn't say too little, just the right amount. He's a legend. He's one of the best in the game. I would say in the top 3 for sure, but it was an interesting chat. I mean, you asked him a very interesting question of basically whether you thought, with the new promotions coming up, if there was going to be any competition, and he didn't think so. What do you think?
I think so. For one, the fans, if you notice the fans and also the wrestlers on board with the WWE product, which I have nothing against the product at all, but when you have only one sole entity, fans tend to be watching it, they're seeing the same thing over and over again. But when you have that competition, it brings out the best in both, and not just both.
Well,
you have
you want to know what I
think?
I think right now the biggest problem with All Elite coming in is it's going to create more jobs, which is good. It's going to create more competitions, which is good. But think how hard it is to get a television deal. Like, it's very difficult. It's very difficult, even if you're a billionaire.
What I'm not mistaken from what I heard is either it's TBS or TNT or one of those broadcasters. I've got to be picking them up.
I don't think it's 100%. I don't think it's 100% yet.
It's just not 100% yet. But you have a rival now against Vince that is also a billionaire that also has money.
Yeah, but what I'm worried about is the problem is you're right. Here's the thing. But territories in a way were very good because it was somewhere where you can kind of get your craft down. But right now, the only people I see that the independents are going to be going up against is each other. So, look, the fact is, All Elite, right now, even in the next 5 years, if they have Jericho, if they have AJ Styles who ends up signing with them, let's say CM, let's say all the best guys that are not in the WWE still would not even, it would still take at least 5 to 7 years before they were able to compete with the WWE. Maybe they would get on, because I know the Sky deal is coming up with WWE, and maybe you could get some European people jumping over. But even then, WWE, it's going to be so difficult. So what I see, Chief, is it's almost going to, it might, I'm not 100% positive, but it might cannibalize the independent scene because now you have Ring of Honor, they have an agreement with New Japan. How is this going to affect New Japan? How is it going to, are they going to be, like, is it really going to be Ring of Honor versus All Elite? Or is it going to be All Elite's going to be a game player? I don't know, man. Maybe I'm biased because I think it's going to hurt the New Japan roster.
I'm going to agree with you. I'm just looking forward to the competition. But what you're saying is true. It's going to take years to build up that competition to get to the boil point. People are going to be curious at first, and they're going to tune in. But with Vince has national dominance with his promotion. Vince has the network. Vince has. I mean, you're still going to look. The WWE is still going to be the metropolis of professional wrestling. And let's be honest here. Like, the first All In show was the sellout. The second time around, it's not as special as the first time around. I mean, it's just. Look, here's the thing. God bless the Young Bucks. They have a major following within the heads of wrestling. Cody Rhodes, but as well, and they've got Jericho, and they've got a very interesting roster, and there's a lot of potential guys they could sign that could be very interesting. You got Hangman Page, that's with them, but it's like, man, is it almost too hardcore? Like, it's like, let's be honest, your average wrestling fan, if we were to ask your average wrestling fan, meat and potatoes, WWE guy who watches every WWE show, I mean, do they know who the Young Bucks are? I mean, I do. I'm ahead. I love the Young Bucks. I watch their YouTube channel, but man, it's like that's just for one segment and one area of viewers. I mean, and when you say competition, you can't just have that demographic, right? So that's kind of where I'm worried, man. Like, and honestly, dude, like I won't lie to you, it just kind of like it kind of screws up with New Japan because now a big portion of their roster is not going to be able to go on into New Japan. Big guys like the Young Bucks, maybe Kenny Omega. I know Jericho has set up a deal. Cody Rhodes. And I don't know, man. I kind of liked it how it was. I liked that there was New Japan. I liked that there was Ring of Honor. I liked that there was PWG for your hardcore, fans, tape trading fans, and like very, exclusive wrestling nerd fans for PWG. And then you had your WWE. But I mean, I don't know, man. It's really hard to say. Well, the one thing that to go back on the show topic and to go back on what we're talking about is wrestling these days. Like you said, you have those talent that's going all you have the New Japan, you have the ones in WWE. You don't really have the good, rough, brawling wrestlers as you used to have, like with the Buddy Colts or the Dick Slaters or the.
Can I be honest with you, brother? In American wrestling, I see that's kind of dead. Like I said, New Japan is probably the closest to that style now, where it feels like when I watch New Japan, and I don't want to just be like a guy who's just praising them all the time, but the reality is when you watch it, you feel like you're watching an athletic competition. And they're the closest. I can imagine I was watching some of the old tapes of Dory Funk, and he brought up Dory Funk. A lot of people don't realize with Dory Funk, he's one of the most underrated, smoothest technicians in the game. And I mean, he wouldn't even run the ropes. He was like that's how technical he was. He was one of those guys that sometimes he wouldn't even run the ropes. And I was watching some of his old 1960s matches. I think it was with Inoki. I'm not 100% sure from Japan. And he was just a phenomenal technician, and you believed it. You believed if that guy was able to hook you, he would tear some ligaments. And I mean, I don't really, with American wrestlers, I don't get that vibe. I don't know how it is for you.
Well, no, I agree with you, but I haven't found a wrestler that I can actually draw towards and be excited for to see anymore. I mean, back in the '80s, we had we had Hogan.
Kenny Omega. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's a different style of wrestler, Keith. But you could make the argument for guys like Kenny Omega, who right now is the darling of the internet's eye, and he's getting a lot of buzz. Cody Rhodes kind of, but I know what you mean.
I just can't get excited no more. That's what I'm saying. With the competition of different promotions to be out there, it gets you that little buzz, because then you don't just have to tune in on Mondays and Tuesdays to watch WWE all the time. You can go to something new. You can get adapted to a new style, a new production.
Why doesn't people watch Global Force?
I guess it's all about preference.
Or Impact, or whatever it's called these days.
Well, Impact, I try. I just can't get into it. I think it goes into now the storylines. A lot of them are so silly, and just like the WWE, a lot of the watching it. I mean, I appreciate all Vince is trying to do in stepping up and bringing into a new age, but bringing a whole new style into it. But to me, I just can't get drawn into it. I don't know what it is. It's hard for me to be drawn into wrestling. I still go back and watch my 80s, early 90s, and my 70s library of wrestling, because the promoting was great. When they were out there speaking, it was great. When they were in the ring, it was great. They had heat. The fans were all up against it. And I know what you're going to say. We don't have that no more, and we're probably not going to get that no more. But the thing is that if you're a wrestling fan, that's where wrestling was. That's where the best time was in wrestling, and that's what I like to see again. I mean, I like to see them work with the storylines better. I like to see them work with their talking and their speaking and their. I mean, it's just. I wish it was more believable nowadays.
Do you think that kind of like jumping topics here? Do you think that Buddy Colt could get into the WWE Hall of Fame?
I think he could. If the Sheik could, if Abdullah the Butcher could, who Abdullah never wrestled for WWE at all, if he could, I know Buddy Colt stands a really good chance, because Buddy Colt was one of the greatest heels in professional wrestling. And I don't know if you ever watched a lot of his matches. I watch them.
I've seen his stuff, especially for getting ready for the show. Yeah. I even asked Meltzer a question on the Observer about Buddy Colt last week. I think it was on Thursday, the 51-minute mark. He was actually giving his take on Buddy Colt and the whole crash. And, he wrestled in the St. Louis area. He wrestled mainly in the Florida area, worked with Kevin Sullivan. And he went over a lot of his career. Yeah, no, I've watched a lot. I've watched a bunch of his stuff since.
I guess I appreciate those wrestlers. I appreciate what they brought to the ring, because when they got in the ring, they really told a story. Like Flair, I really a lot of people say, well, a lot of people know he took a lot from one wrestler, from another wrestler, but I think a lot of wrestlers do that nowadays. They take from one to another and they build on their own character. But you have to admit, when you watch Flair back in the 80s and when he was the Horseman, even in the 90s, he gave great promos. But when he was a wrestler and he was in the ring and he was fighting, he blew up he really knew how to get the heat. He really knew how to drive into that storyline. Same thing with Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan was awesome in the ring. He was awesome presenting himself and promoting and getting out there cutting a promo. You just don't see that with the talent these days. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like, take here's an example. Braun Strowman and Brock Lesnar. It was on Raw a couple of weeks ago. That was one of the weakest promos I ever saw. Watching wrestling as a fan or whatever, it was one of the weakest.
But, let's be honest, Keith. Can you even get through a 3-hour Raw? I can't.
No, I skip through. I sometimes go back to it. Sometimes I even cut it off early. I think 3 hours is way too long for that show. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think, dude, it's a lot of people's opinion, man. It's tough.
And
3 hours of anything is tough, man.
And I really miss the cliffhangers. I said that's many times when other shows, I miss the cliffhangers. I miss the reasons to tune in. And I think it goes back what you were saying with demographic of fans. With wrestling fans, and especially in the South, they're always going to look at NWA, or they're going to look out the old territories, because back then they appreciated they really got into the sport. I remember when I was managing in the South, and with Jimmy Valiant and that, there was a lot of heat. There was a lot of heat.
Even back then,
it's something you don't see.
Which was like in the twilight of the territory.
No, not just in the twilight. This is back when I was in. It was just there was still heat, and you still had those, like you said, you still had the loyal fans that came every show you had. They would come and watch, and they knew who you are. They still try to cause riots. They still got behind you, and it was something you don't see nowadays in wrestling. I mean, you don't see much interaction with the fans anymore. I was hearing it now that some wrestlers can't high five fans anymore when they're coming down the aisle. And some of the speculation of some people that now they have to control who they're dating and seeing and so forth behind the scenes, tattoos, and all goes with marketing. Of they market your image, so they want to see who you can see.
In a way, that kind of stuff happened, but it was a lot more different. I mean, before you couldn't have heels and baby faces riding together. Before, if you were in a bar and someone started to fight with you, I mean, he brought up Bill Watts earlier, and I know that with promoters like Bill Watts, like if you got into a bar fight and you lost, see you later, right? So you're right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little just done differently now. You know, it's a little bit differently, but I do agree with you, man. Totally agree with you.
But when you asked earlier, or you messaged me through the thing about Lucian, other co-host, Lucian is under the weather. He's battling a really bad cold.
He was sick last week, right? I was too. Yeah,
he'll be joining us next week, hopefully. But also, one of our old co-hosts will be joining us next week just for one show. Brandon will be coming on just to host one of the shows with us. Not a regular, but just to do a regular appearance.
Let me change speeds on you since we have about 20 minutes left. What video games are you playing at the moment, man?
I really have not. Well, I've been playing the basic your Red Deads and your Forest and so forth with video games, but I have not been playing as much as I want because I've been focusing more of my effort into this show and also a lot of things with K&S, especially with the film, promoting the film and everything. But when I do have my downtime, I'm usually on Red Dead or the Forest and really enjoying.
And you were mentioning something about Halloween. Maybe Gun Media was going to take on the Halloween project.
Yeah,
is that confirmed?
No, it hasn't been confirmed, but they have been meeting and talking. And I think if someone is going to pick up a horror franchise, make it a video game, I know you have your differences with that whole situation, but I think Gun Media might be able to do it if they really learn from their mistakes of the past. You know what I'm saying?
Do you play Friday 13th still? Or?
No, not as much as I would like to.
You know what, man? Here's what I think about that scenario. Would I like a Halloween game to come? Yeah. I still really think Dead by Daylight is a great game. It's a little repetitive, but, it still has the Michael Myers character. Would I like to see Gun Media do it? I don't know, man. I feel with Gun Media, man, I feel like because the thing with the Friday 13th game, it was such a anticipated game. It had gotten so much coverage. It had it was such wasted potential that I think that there's that bad stigma of, they pretty much flopped. Where the game was great, and then they just pretty much dropped the ball with it. And I almost feel like I don't know if they would be able to recreate that with a new Halloween game. I mean, it would be great. It would be awesome.
No,
but then there's all these, licensing problems and well, there's still like a lot of stuff.
That's why Gun Media is speaking with Blumhouse themselves, and I know the people behind Blumhouse have speculated that they do want to get into the video game market, and they do want to make a horror franchise into a video game. And I think Halloween would be the best way to go with that. But to get back on topic, what we're the show tonight with wrestling, when I meant the people I mentioned earlier about with Buddy Colt when he went up against with like Nick Bockwinkel, Freddie Blassie, you as a fan, I know you're a huge wrestling fan. What is your take on those wrestlers, like Nick Bockwinkel and Freddie Blassie and Ray Gunkel?
It was interesting for me because he had mentioned the Luzes, he had mentioned the Gerald Briscoes of the world, the Nick Bockwinkel's. He mentioned Billy Robinson being a loudmouth. I'm sure he was, but he came from an era of guys that could like hook and shoot, and I've always been kind of interested in like catch wrestling and that style of wrestling. So I was actually even interested, maybe even asking him about like, when he used to work, if he ever worked in Canada and Calgary, if he ever met Stu Hart and all of those guys. But the reality is that era, of the Luzes, of the Billy Robinsons, of the Gerald Briscoes, I mean, these guys were pedigree animals. You believed it. They came from a serious amateur background. I mean, I've been told even today, Gerald Briscoe is, he could still teach. Like I've heard stories of him taking down NCAA guys even today, young guys. Mm-hmm. So these guys were serious athletes and very believable.
And like I was saying earlier, is like I'm a huge fan. I was a huge fan of Nick Bockwinkel. A lot of people. So, but he was a great, like a good showman.
Was Bockwinkel an AWA guy mainly?
Yes.
And then he went over to WCW only as a commissioner very briefly, but he was an NWA champion as well, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then you had the wrestlers like with when you go in the tag team division, that Buddy Colt face was like Gene Anderson and Ole Anderson. I really enjoyed Gene's style of wrestling. Ole was more was a strong brawler. Was a very rough, rugged wrestler. I think he's kind of bitter now, but I mean he with a lot of.
He's kind of bitter. He's super bitter.
But he was you can't take anything from him of what he did in the ring.
I mean, he was a great booker, man. Like he was the booker for WCW as well. Like, yeah, man, it's weird because like Bill Watts as well, like really tough guy, but great booker. But and Ole Anderson, he was a booker for a very long time. Yep.
And you mentioned Leroy McGurk. Leroy McGurk is the father of past guest that we had on our show, Mike McGurk.
Mike McGurk,
and, yeah, and Leroy was a great promoter back in the day. He didn't know what he was doing. He was really good at what he was doing. And
well, it's interesting when Buddy was talking about the Armory days, and like the thing about the Armory days that people don't realize is that you would get the same crowds every week, which meant you're dealing with a very educated crowd, and the psychology is a lot different when you're working to. I don't like with guys like Buddy. I didn't even, if you notice, I didn't even like to use the word work because they don't really like that term. They see it as an athletic, and I have to like hold myself back because I know he's really old.
I had to correct myself when I say.
I had to correct myself a few times too.
Yeah, because in wrestling, when you get into sport, especially if you're trained by an old school wrestler, like I was with Jimmy Allen, and you worked with people Larry Zbyszko, even Corny. You can't. there's a language and a respect that you have to have for the sport.
Yeah, 100%.
Like when you're stepping, a lot of people don't understand. Like when you watch wrestling, you see, your people that respect the sport a lot is when they come into the ring and they wipe their feet off on the apron before they step through the ropes. That's something you're trained in out of respect for the sport. Because it's like wiping your shoes off before you enter
that era, man. That era was such, you had such tough guys, man. You were dealing with guys that like could literally rip you apart, and had to do that in and out the ring, right? When he was talking about his stories of like people trying to shoot him and stuff, and, like that was just a different era, man. It was a different era.
No, it was, but that comes from the South. I remember being in the ring, and it was Jimmy Val. I was talking up here, talking trash the way I do and that. And I remember an old lady coming out of the fans and actually chasing me to the back, and it was Francine from ECW who was with me at the time, and she had to hold that woman back and just try to calm her down and let me get to the back room. I mean, people really go. I mean, I remember having a fan come out to the apron and try to grab my leg and trip me. I'm just a manager. I just jumped in the ring to do something, and she.
And can you imagine how it was in like the '60s and the '70s?
Oh yeah, back in Buddy Colt. Buddy Colt was talking about people trying to shoot him. Remember those wrestlers like Bobby Heenan was saying how the heat was back
Bruce
then.
Brody was killed. Let's be honest. Let's call it like it was. He was killed in Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was a crazy time of wrestling, and the fans were crazy, but we loved them. I mean, the wrestlers they knew, they bought that ticket, they knew what they wanted.
That was the ultimate. That was the ultimate props if you were able to get that kind of heat. I know guys like Watts. If you had riots at the end of your show, I mean, that was a successful show.
Yep. And Buddy Colt to me is special. It's like when you're a child of the '80s and you grew up watching wrestling. Hulk Hogan was your role model, or Macho Man Randy Savage, and those wrestlers. To me, growing up I grew up in the '80s, but Buddy Colt was a huge image to me. Someone I love watching. I watched him with my grandfather. I watched him on TV. I followed a lot of his career back. Not when these are like when they rebroadcasted a lot of shows. I'm not saying I'm that old, but I'm just saying that a lot of I was drawn into that. I loved watching at 5 o'clock. You tune in and you watch Worldwide Wrestling, World Championship Wrestling, Georgia Championship Wrestling. You had that you just tuned in and you loved watching it. And I always rooted for the villains. And Buddy Colt, to me, was a definition of what a villain was. Kevin Sullivan, same thing. I also liked watching like Dick Slater, Dick Murdoch, the Crusher. I mean, there's just so many. I think we lost so many greats with Roddy Piper and Vader. Leon White, last year we lost him, and he was a good, tough, old-school wrestler. I mean, he was in the 90s and that. He made a name for himself as Big Van Vader, but he knew how to hold his own. Paul Orndorff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he was a legit guy, and a lot of people don't know that his spot, when he went to Japan, originally their Vader character was supposed to be actually for Ultimate Warrior, if you can believe it. I couldn't picture anyone else but Leon White doing that portrayal, and I don't think anyone would be as believable, even the Ultimate Warrior. But yeah, I mean, he had a great career, and we lost him too soon.
But it's just like I say, take Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman had the definition of he could really be a force in wrestling, but then you have him constantly losing. They shouldn't have done that. They should have made him more of an attraction like Andre the Giant was.
Yeah,
presented him better. Another thing, but this ties in with the question I had earlier about the internet age. When you have the internet age and you see pictures leak of him doing charity shows and dressing up as an elf and dancing through the city and doing things like that, you lose that image. As a fan, you lose that image of who
we're in a different
is.
Time, though, Keith. We're in a different time.
It was a different time, but this is what
it's like
I was trying to say.
Me saying I missed Blockbuster Video. You know, like it's sadly, those days, as much as we can glamorize them and remember them in such a great light, which I wish was around to this day. You know that I'm an old school guy as well. It's gone, man. It's like, as much as I'll watch the WWE product, and I mean, you're a publicly traded company now. You're dealing with a publicly traded company.
But
it's just not the same.
That's something that's interesting you brought up about the Blockbuster video thing and time thing and different age. Did you know that VHS is coming back into the market?
Are you serious? In what sense?
They're bringing them back into the market. They're going to start selling VHS films in your stores again and market them again.
Limited?
That goes. No, just they're not doing it limited. They're doing it as they're doing with vinyls now, with Polaroids now, cameras. They're all back in the market. Everything.
Oh, wow.
Imagine
if they did Laserdisc, man. Wow, that would be awesome. I mean, that's cool. Mm-hmm. That's like, if they do limited runs, there's a market for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd much rather watch a movie on VHS than a DVD.
No, I rather a VHS really captures the essence of a film. I think that I really appreciate a VHS sometimes, putting in a good tape and watching it.
Has a nice, grainy, cool feel to it.
We have to all your fans listening out there, which we have a lot of listeners today, and which I really want to thank you all for tuning in. We will be following this episode. Will be a special 30-minute wrap-up episode, which I don't know if, Peter, you're going to be on for that no, you
I have to leave at 11 o'clock, man. I got to go to work.
Yeah. So you could join me, and I'll be bringing you through a lot of the catch-ups and updates.
Yeah, you can do it also.
Forth.
You can call the Max Solo.
Yep, but like I say, the show today was to tribute to a special. It
was fun, man. It was just like nice listening to like those old-timer stories, man, and like the glory days of how wrestling used to be, man, because I mean, like I said, man, like it's a true fact that, Hogan has gone on the record before and has modeled his heel career and heel tendencies to guys like Buddy Colt. He's one of those unsung heroes.
Oh, yeah. Yep, but I don't know if you want to call a wrestler an old timer, because believe me, a lot of wrestlers nowadays, even though they're up there in age, they can still do major ass kicking.
Oh yeah, he can kick my ass for sure. But old school is the better term.
Old school is the best term to use. But I want to run down a list of guests coming about in our next episodes. How I spoke with K&S Society TALK Live, which we want to present talent out there from other countries, and also to get their name out there and to talk about their presence in film and entertainment, what they do. Next guest will be Sean Robinson, who'll be joining us. He's an Australian actor. He'll be joining us next week.
What was he in?
He was in a lot of Australian independent films. Nothing really like huge in the States here, but I want to bring our audience into different demographics in different countries, and to also bring that talent to help them get known. But we also be joined by Chris Moore, who on January 30th. Who Chris Moore, he did Bless the Children, an independent horror film, which is another thing I want to aim out to do, and that is to bring out some independent directors to get their product out there. And we also be joined by someone that is you might know a lot of his films. He did films like There's Nothing Out There, Nightmare Man, Party to Hell, Black Room. Did a lot of good old school fun films like Bonnie and Clyde, Justified, Tiger's Tail. He has a long resume. Yeah. Wolfie Knifsky will be joining us. He'll be joining us on the 6th. We'll also be joined by
have you talked to Scott Essman at all? How's he doing?
Scott Essman, yes, Scott Essman. I talked to him actually today. He's doing good. He's teaching a class, staying really busy. So he'll be joining us in future episodes as well with some talent. Chris Green will be joining us on February 13th. Greenway, he'll be joining us on February 13th. He brought his films like Hot Tub Party Massacre, and also has a show running that is Owl TV, which is really interesting up in Canada. And he'll be joining us on the 13th. On February 20th, we'll be joined by, that you brought up, since you brought up Scott brought his Todd Tucker on last season. We'll be joined by an actor, Caleb Thomas, on the 20th. And Caleb worked with some good actors. He worked with James Franco, and he worked with Bryan Cranston. He worked with a lot of other films. Also worked on one of Todd Tucker's films. And he'll be coming on board as a special guest on February 20th. And we have some other guests that's going to be lined up as well. So we have a good season ahead of us.
Yeah, no, I'm excited, man. Today's show was great. And how about the last week's show with Dee Wallace?
Dee Wallace, that was a very special show. She was such a special
I think one
guest.
of our best.
We have one of our best. And like I say, I want to have a lot of different guests on. I want to bring a lot of different light on, a lot of different talent out there. And that's what this show is all about. And I'm going to just go back to another quick match before we wrap up, because I want to come back on the air and I want to talk to you about how your career is going, Peter. So let's just do this one quick match, and then we'll come back on the air.
Deep into this lights-out match, Buddy Colt moving across the ring. It's Buddy Colt and Dusty Rhodes against Paul Jones and Eddie Graham. Four giants of the wrestling world colliding in this squared circle, and the referee watching now. His purpose, count a man's shoulders down or see if he concedes. Anything goes in a lights-out match. Paul Jones now wreaking havoc on both Dusty Rhodes and Buddy Colt. Jones and Graham, partners in this match. Dusty Rhodes being set upon now by Eddie Graham, who's over in that far corner. And now, with all four of them still in the ring, as we said, anything goes. These men well aware of the risks that they took when they agreed to move into this lights-out match. No NWA sanction. Graham continuing to move against Dusty Rhodes, and Jones has Buddy Colt in a side headlock. And it's obvious now that Dusty Rhodes has a laceration of the head, and Paul Jones quick to take advantage of this situation. Dusty Rhodes, 280 pounds, a bear of a man, capable of taking tremendous punishment, and that's exactly what he's doing at this juncture of the match. Taking tremendous punishment at the hands of Paul Jones and Eddie Graham. Watch now this teamwork between Graham and Jones. Graham catching Dusty Rhodes, stunning him. This has to be like hitting an ox right between the eyes. Buddy Colt to the far side of the ring. Paul Jones smashing away at Dusty Rhodes again. And this man Rhodes taking tremendous punishment now. Staggered, dazed, has that great second effort trying to get over to his tag team partner. Again, Paul Jones cutting him short, catching him in the head once again. And Dusty Rhodes' face becoming a crimson mask. Dusty Rhodes caught over the heart, dropped to the canvas, and the crowd roaring their approval now as Paul Jones has his man measured. Dusty Rhodes coming up. Jones continues to measure, pounds away again across the head of Dusty Rhodes. These men able to throw caution to the winds. No rules or regulations to hinder them at this juncture. All right, Eddie Graham moving in now. Catching Dusty Rhodes again, and Dusty continues to take great punishment. Now Buddy Colt moving in from behind, but he's caught in the midsection by Eddie Graham. Graham, with the hardest punch in wrestling history, drops Buddy Colt to the canvas. Again, we have all four men in the ring. Again, we repeat, this is a lights-out match. The referee's only purpose in there to count a man's shoulders down or to hear him concede. And with these 4 minutes, doubtful that anybody is going to concede. Graham pounding away with everything he's got now against Dusty Rhodes, and the crowd once again coming alive as Graham measures him, pounds him across the head again. And Rhodes, taking these punches to the head, finally collapses to the canvas, finally moves over, tags up with Buddy Colt. And almost inhuman the amount of beating this man can take and still maintain his senses. Paul Jones watching. Here comes Buddy Colt moving in against Eddie Graham. Eddie Graham swinging from the floor. And these two men now slugging at random. And as again, no rules or regulations. And consequently, we have 4 men back into the ring. Graham getting a side headlock on Buddy Colt. Off of the ropes, he's tripped up by Dandy Jack. Buddy Colt's the new personal manager. Dandy Jack tripping him up. Dusty Rhodes back on his feet. This man has taken a lot of punishment, is still back on his feet. And now Eddie Graham outside the ring after Dandy Jack. And here comes Dusty Rhodes. And it may just be that Dusty Rhodes and Buddy Colt have bit off a little bit more than they can chew in this match. And there's Dusty Rhodes hurtling a chair into the ring, but Paul Jones gets it. Rhodes trying to throw it to Buddy Colt in desperation, but Paul Jones has it. And now both men fighting over that chair. The referee trying to separate them, trying to get that chair if he can. Trying to break it free. And Buddy Colt has the chair, and the referee caught on the head now. Drop to the canvas. Buddy Colt, a boot to the midsection. Colt drops that chair. He's stunned, and Paul Jones using it with devastating effectiveness on Buddy Colt. Has him stunned on the canvas. Eddie Graham running Dusty Rhodes into the far ring post, and Graham now moves into the ring. Cross body ride on Buddy Colt, and the second referee moving in. A count of three, and Eddie Graham and Paul Jones have won this lights-out match, but Dusty Rhodes and Dandy Jack move into the ring, and Paul...
And that was another old-school match. Now, very quickly, how's your career going, Peter? I know it's blowing up like crazy.
Career's doing great, man. It's, I've been really busy. As I said on the show before, I was writing a lot in the last couple of years, and, things are really starting to take off, man. I have 4 EPs coming out. So what EPs are they're like mini albums, so they're like half an album, 4-track EPs, so they're like a half of the album. So I've got 4 of those coming out this year. I have a lot of European dates coming up, and actually playing in Puerto Rico soon, actually, in May. And I mean, my life now, it's going to start to, now that I've been doing very well, modestly well with my releases, and, things have been really panning out, and I've had a couple of hits, and things have been really moving, and I'm starting to get more shows. And with more shows, it starts to become more of a, you start to kind of live the life of a wrestler in the sense that you're like going from town to town. So, I'm going to be playing only this year. I'm not playing that many shows in the States, but I will be playing a lot of shows in Europe, big festivals and whatnot. But, I mean, music has been going well, man. I mean, it seems like if you go on my Facebook, every week I've got a release, and I'm very blessed to, have it. So, people are really digging my stuff at the moment.
That's great. See, like I said, your career is blowing on up there, and, I mean, you're very talented, extremely talented, and it's just going to be a great year for you coming up. And,
yeah, I mean, you know what, dude? It was a lot of hard work. I was getting into a scenario where I was kind of turning into like a journeyman, and I really wasn't happy to where I was at, and I knew that in order to get better, I had to take a risk on myself. So, man, I wrote so much. I'm still writing music. I mean, even today, before we went on the show, I was writing. I have to go into a mastering session right after this, and it's a grind.
Well, that's what you're going to be doing while I go on a year in under a minute. So.
Yeah, how long do we have here? Well, that was another show. That went by quick, huh?
Yeah, well, under a minute, and then I'm going on to the next episode. So those listening, just tune on in to K&S Society Talk Live. I'll be hosting that show and doing some recaps.
And thanks for having me. I know I'm a co-host, but I always have to thank you for having me on. And thanks for everyone who's listening. And next week, brother,
Sean Robinson. So we'll be on here again.
The train keeps rolling.
Okay. Have a good night, Peter.
Love you, brother. Love you, everybody.